And with one click of the button, he was live. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to my 8 p.m. live stream. And I hope this one finds you all well. Usual routine, suffice to say, we've got a really interesting guest tonight, and we've got a really interesting topic to go with it. So what I want you to do is, if you're on Twitter, please retweet the heck out of this, share it. If you enjoy what we're talking about, send hearts and send super hearts. And similarly, if you like it on Facebook, give me the thumbs up, like I see some of you are doing. And basically, then please join in the conversation. Let me, first of all, introduce my guest. So I'm just going to bring Fiona onto the stream. So good evening, Fiona.
Good evening, David.
And you're very welcome back on the stream, by the way. It's been a few weeks, and so much has happened. So we look forward to having the discussion. So folks, you know, the thing about this one is, just want to make sure, by the way, that we have good conversation. So I would ask the moderators who I see are on the stream, just make sure that if any trolls pop up, just squash them, okay? Trolls don't get a second chance on my timeline, folks. That's how it is. Doesn't have the conversation. Doesn't even help them, actually. So anyway, that's suffice to say. We are going to be joined by, about halfway through the program, by one of our regulars, Jed. Jed, star of my live streams. He's going to come on to chat as well. Hi, Jed. Nice to see you. But we got loads of stuff to talk through. So Fiona, I mean, let's start at the very beginning, okay? So the thing that piqued my interest was, I'm going to see if I can just share this, if I can. Just give me a second. I wanted to share with the audience this article, folks. Can you see this article? It's all about SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, and the thing in it that intrigued me and what we want to talk about is, you can see it says here that for many viral diseases, it's well known that the viral RNA can be detected long after the disappearance of infectious viruses. Now, this is the Lancet saying this, by the way. So this is not kind of idle speculation. The Lancet is a very respected publication, Fiona. And I think you were the first person I saw put this up. And like so much of your very well informed tweets, I thought it was really interesting. And at a time when there's so much focus on all these new cases breaking out by the second, apparently all over the West. I thought what we could start off with doing usefully would be perhaps for you to talk us through in terms of the Lancet article and what it's saying, and then let's talk about what that means, and then let's talk about in terms of cases where that goes, and just generally the whole COVID thing. I mean, it is very important on social media where big tech is watching us, Fiona, as we speak. Right across the YouTube piece, Facebook, and of course our good old tyrannical friends here on Twitter. We obviously moderate what we say because we wouldn't want to offend them. But but it's probably quite important to be factual and scientific and truthful, and that's what we're going to be. So, Fiona, the Lancet article, what did you make of it, and what's your thoughts?
Well, honestly, I wasn't surprised, and that's not because I'm in any way brilliant, far from it, but I have had the privilege of discussing with Professor Dolores Cahill, who is a world-renowned immunologist, and I have had access to her research and her collaborative work with other world-renowned doctors, such as Dr. Sherry Tempany. And my own investigations into the PCR test have given me great cause for concern about the lack, to me, of transparency in exactly what it is testing for and how the results are being arrived at. And right at the beginning of the pandemic, you would have to have asked the question, goodness, the tests were developed so quickly, it was almost even before the actual virus was properly identified. If indeed you could you could actually state categorically that that virus has been isolated. And indeed, there is still some speculation about that. So I'm not actually going to, get into any more details about the isolation of the virus. But the PCR test, by its construction, does not distinguish, and this is what the Lancet sort of compendium was discussing.
Yeah.
It does not distinguish between an infectious virus on the one hand and a non-infectious RNA fragment on the other, because SARS-CoV-2, which is, in other words, our COVID-19, is an RNA virus, as you guys probably know. So therefore, it has to have a very labor-intensive PCR test to try and identify it, if indeed it is doing. And therefore, you cannot categorically state that you have a live infectious virus within you, or you just have a fragment within your system that could be persisting there for weeks. So the issue that has been raised in the Lancet is merely saying we need clarity, and we need clarity quickly about what exactly is being tested for in our countries. What are the tests that the testing kit that's being used, and what exactly is being done? Because if you go, for example, in Ireland, you have the NHS, we have the HSE, Health Service Executive. So if you go onto the HSE website, they tell you that they're testing for coronavirus. Now, you guys have probably noticed in the media now that it's no longer COVID-19, but coronavirus, which is a general term that discusses currently up to 36 different viruses within that umbrella, including the common cold. Okay, so 3 of which have been pandemics. We've had SARS and MERS, and now we have SARS-CoV-2. But coronavirus is so general. So now the media is referring to coronavirus. The HSE is saying they're testing for coronavirus. So that all immediately gives me cause for concern. So what, they're actually identifying the common cold? Is that what's going on? Is it so general that if we have any sort of RNA fragments of SARS or SARS from 2003, that it's picking that up? What is it actually testing for? So I advise all of you listening to do that investigation. Look on the NHS or whatever your health service executive is and see what the test is looking for. Because to me, it's deliberately being evasive. That's my view.
Well, let's kind of zero in. So is it the test? We keep hearing about the tests that they're doing, and they've really ramped up the number of tests enormously over the summer. But it is the test that is ordinarily being used is the PCR test. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, that is in the majority of cases, that is my understanding. Now, you could have an antibody test, but that again, which is drawing blood and looking for IgG antibodies, which is what your immune system will produce in response to the virus. And it's also what a vaccine is required to induce within you, an antibody response.
But
those 2 tests, the PCR, which is when they go and they put that awful probe down the back of the throat and they try and do you know what? I don't know, do any of you know anybody who's had it, but I do. I know of someone who knows someone who had to have that test, and they said they would never do it again. They had eye pain for 6 hours afterwards. And this is an adult, and they said it was horrendous.
And Fiona, that's where they put the strip thing. Does it go down? Is it down your nose? Oh God!
Yes, right down the back of your nose, and it's designed. It's almost designed to. It's almost like you feel it's piercing your brain. That's what that person said, and I have no idea. Personally, I'm not a medic, so I can't make a definitive statement on this. But why it needs to be so invasive? What exactly is it doing? If for example, you and I can transmit this virus just by speaking to each other, which is why we're supposed to be muzzled and 6 feet apart, then surely they could just be doing some sort of quick swab of the saliva in the side of our mouths to get it.
Yeah. Well. I mean, Jed asked the question here, Fiona. So, what test should we be looking for? Well, Jed, I think, as from my perspective, I think, Jed, in the UK, I think it's overwhelmingly the PCR test. And that's why I want to just zero in on the PCR test, because, again, for the benefit of the listeners and viewers, Fiona, because it's pretty clear that the PCR test, therefore, it's a broad spectrum generic coronavirus test. So it's not a COVID-19 specific test. Is that fair?
That is my understanding. Unless, our health service executives or the NHS comes out and gives specific details of what they're doing, then I can only align with what you're saying. If they're saying they're testing for coronavirus, then it is logical to conclude that it is a very general test.
Yeah, and we've got a question here from one of the viewers. What is the PCR test? And the answer is the PCR test is this generic coronavirus test, which does pick up coronaviruses and which could pick up COVID-19.
Oh, yes, it could. Yes, if it was specifically designed for this. Yes, it's a polymerase chain reaction test. But I have to say that the inventor of this test, David, who was Carrie B. Mullis, he said, and apparently he passed away last year, these PCR tests cannot detect free infectious viruses at all. So if the inventor of the test raised concerns about its efficacy in this particular context, we should also raise concerns about its efficacy.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not stating malpractice, okay? I can't be definitive like that. But what I am calling for is a thorough, detailed investigation and transparency from our health service as to what exactly they are testing for. They should be able to give us this information to reassure the public that the livelihood destroying, welfare destroying, health impacting, economy destroying measures they are imposing upon us are based upon robust, scientific, fail-safe testing. Because otherwise, this is, well, it's almost criminal.
Well, you see, so if the starting point in all of this is that the PCR test, which does appear to be, as you say, from what we know, that is what they are using, right? So, so the next thing about this is then, Fiona, the next point is that this is being used and it's finding all kinds of cases, spikes, and all this. Certainly here in Northern Ireland, we've been told, we've got it's very worrying that as we test gazillions of people, we're finding. Well, the language sometimes varies because sometimes they do suggest it's COVID and sometimes they suggest it's coronavirus. Interchangeable, as somebody points out. I think Stan here makes the point to befuddle the public to suit their own stats. Well, Stan, you can say that, and I'm not going to disagree with you. But that's what. But this is the problem, Fiona. They're using this test to then suggest that somehow or another, at a time when the mortality rate is almost zero, when people hospitalised, I'm not sure what the Irish numbers are, but here in Northern Ireland, I think we have two people in hospital, nobody in intensive care, and no deaths. But we get all these cases. So is it that a question that this test, this PCR test, is the thing that's generating all these cases?
Yes, that is my understanding. And remember, cases don't mean infections. Based upon the Lancet report, based upon my discussions with Professor Cahill and her discussions with Dr. Sherry Tempany and Judy Mikovich, etc. Yeah. So cases do not equal infection.
So what is a case? Tell us what is meant by a case then, because they use this word, we've discovered more cases. What is it?
Yeah, cases For the most part, and again, I'm taking this from Professor Cahill, mean immunity. Because if they are picking up, even let's say they were, effective, the test,
Mhm.
the PCR test for SARS-CoV-2 specifically,
Perfect.
if they're picking up this fragment of the RNA from that virus, then that confers immunity to you. It means that you have had the virus, you are in the process of clearing it through your system. So therefore, in the future, you should have, if you did the blood test, you should have the
Yeah.
antibody present. You should have immunity. Now, just while I'm on that, and it's in my head, you know that they're saying, the World Health Organization is saying, and Fauci is coming out saying, oh, just because you've got immunity or you've had it, you've survived it, and you have the immunity, doesn't mean that the immunity will persist for you.
Yeah.
Which calls into question the whole concept of a vaccine. Because if your natural immune response doesn't apparently give you the antibodies which will protect you from that virus in the future, then how on earth is a vaccine going to do that if your own wonderful immune system can't? So again, to me anyway, I'm just the layperson looking at this, scratching my head, thinking, then that actually calls into question. And then I'm thinking, is that why they're saying, you're going to need multiple doses of this vaccine?
Oh, yeah.
So hence, you're going to need your yearly jab, your 6 months jab. And another question, guys, it's just in my mind, because we know from virology that this particular virus has mutated, and probably mutated several times since it cleared the globe.
Yeah.
So which mutation are they actually testing for anyway? Assuming that they're testing for it, which we've discussed that they probably aren't. So which mutation is out there now? And which mutation is the vaccine being developed against?
Well, you see, going back to the PCR test. So the PCR test, it can detect if there's been shards of COVID.
Yes.
But as you say, if it detects that, that's not the same as saying it's picked up infection. It's merely picked up the presence of something that in the past may have been infection, presumably.
Correct. Yes.
So
no one knows for sure what it actually means, because there is no clarity around it. There's so many questions to ask, but we're not getting any information.
But what we are getting, Fiona, is we've all seen the curve of decline since April, basically. COVID-19, as a matter of empirical fact, has declined in pretty much everywhere, pretty much at the same rate, lockdown or no lockdown. So wonder what the point of the lockdown was. So we've seen the same sort of pattern, the same trend, and we're seeing a world that we're living in right now today, where fundamentally mortality from COVID is all but vanished. I mean, it can't be defined as a pandemic, because there's not enough people with it, I think, actively in them at the moment. But cases is a different thing. Cases, we've been told here in Northern Ireland, are wonderfully intelligent health minister. And I've seen more intelligent things lying on their backs at the bottom of ponds. Our wonderful health minister has warned us. We've been warned that he's you have to laugh, Fiona. He's very concerned about the fact that there's all these cases and people are just not taking people. We need to take this really seriously. So no deaths, basically nobody in hospital, nobody in intensive care, but we've got cases. So that's why I want to focus on, this cases thing appears to be being, used by the people in power to drive us somewhere. Where do you think that might be going?
It's not going to be pleasant what I'm going to say. At the moment, I feel remember, cases could mean immunity, but they don't mean infections. And I agree with you. At the present time, they are the key driver of this pandemic to keep it going forward. Where it's going to go will be, I fear, hard lockdowns. And certainly when you look at Ireland and you look at what the new restrictions that have just come into play, they have come faster than I anticipated. And what I am worried about is that going back to school. Now, here's the thing, David, and this is my key concern. The HSE is requiring that all school children and nursery children between the ages of 2 to 12 get the flu vaccine in the autumn going back to school. Now, evidence has shown that those who had the flu vaccine, and I think the stat is they were 36% more likely to get this COVID-19. Okay.
From last year.
Yes.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't know what strain of the flu is being vaccinated against in any case. Secondly, young children below the age of 5 in a court in Australia were ruled against requiring a flu vaccination because it was dangerous for them. My concern with that is that if they go ahead with the vaccination of young children, those children will go to school. They will develop symptoms and side effects because the side effects of the flu vaccine are flu-like symptoms. Sniffles, temperature, headaches. And all of a sudden, can you imagine, you will have your massive cluster all over the country. You will have clusters. Then you will have contact tracing because then you'll have to isolate the children and their families and their friends. Those poor children will have symptoms, and because they'll have been vaccinated with the flu. And we, as I say, we obviously need to know what's in it. So that's my fear, is they're getting us to that point where they will then take it off with the vaccination program on the young.
Well, yeah, and that is a very disturbing thing. And in fact, Fiona, one of the reasons I was so keen to have you on the program tonight is that, Ireland, folks, I mean, I know people watch us from all around the world. A lot of UK people obviously watching it, though, understandably. And Ireland, Fiona, it's not good. And a lot of people here maybe don't quite understand some of the kind of pretty authoritarian stuff that we're seeing in Ireland. It's a bit similar to what we've seen in down in New Zealand and perhaps in Melbourne. It's kind of amazing, but like those places are a long way away. You, Fiona, you're our nearest neighbour, and yet perhaps you can just talk the viewers through some of the remarkable legislation, for example, that's just been shoved right through. Just tell us about that, because I think this is interesting, folks.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Just in the last couple of days, the cabinet, such as it is, has decided that our police force, the Gardaí, will be given new powers to enforce COVID-19 rules around social gatherings, particularly, now listen to this, in restaurants or bars serving food, because our pubs aren't open yet, and in private homes.
Yeah, so that's the bit. Yeah.
Yes. This is what I shuddered about. Now, I've been warning about this legislation from really the time that it was drawn up. Remember, we all had our emergency legislation. You did, we've all had it around the world. The emergency pandemic health legislation that was shoved in. We have a constitution here. You have a different system.
Yeah.
That did facilitate. It did have an opening for the forced removal of people from homes.
Yeah.
It was there. And all it needs to be is firmed up into specific regulations or statutory instruments, as we would call them.
Yeah.
So in my mind, however they enforce this, permitting the Gardaí to enter our private dwelling and, enact whatever measures they see fit in the face of whether or not we have a social gathering, whether or not we have more than, I think it's 6 people. You're only allowed to have 6 people in your home, and they're not supposed to come from more than 3 other households. I mean, this is going into from the sublime to the ridiculous, David. Yeah. So once has been, now our, I call them the blue tick influencers. They're all there to push the narrative, and we know what they do. They know we know what they do. Then we have the media reporters, you know, the guy, our health reporter from RTE, you have your guy probably from the BBC, whatever. They're all out there plugging this. Oh, yes, you know, how could you possibly have a party in your home? And they have their stories. So last weekend we had a bar, they were having fun, they were knocking them back, and the next thing on the Sunday you have, look at this, irresponsible, how could they? And the next thing you know, we have the legislation for the guards to knock on your door, come into your home. Well, I tell you, they're not coming into mine. That's it.
No.
You do not agree, you do not consent, and you do not understand. When they say, do you understand? Say no. There's a whole line of sovereignty rights that we need to make ourselves very aware of. But that's another story, David.
Well, actually, sorry, Fiona. Just to say, I did see that the bar. It was a bar, and it was I forget where it was. Dublin, wasn't it? And to me, actually, to be honest, it represented a scene when I was a much younger person. I would have, you know, I'm sure we've sat in bars where people,
of course we have,
late night drinking, people having fun. And the bit that horrified me was, and this is what's so worrying about this entire COVID agenda, is that this was a bit of enjoyment, and I guess mostly young people, and it's been taken and turned into the most horrific, irresponsible thing ever. And it's now being used to usher in kind of totalitarian-esque legislation. I mean,
that's the game plan. And I'm sure you've seen the same in the UK. But in Ireland, we're so much smaller, so you can identify all these things. So we all knew once they have that, then we knew what was coming. They did it all through the summer. It's, you know, drip, 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 set up a story, have a go at it, and then bring in the legislation. It's pernicious. It's absolutely criminal what they're doing.
And the thing about it is, it doesn't stop, does it? I mean, you know, I think we're in the UK. We are in day, oh gosh, I've lost track. I think it's around about day 154 of the 21-day lockdown. And you know, I mean, the thing is that they've been remarkably successful in getting a lot of the population. I estimate here in Northern Ireland, just based on what I see, 99% anyway, 99% compliance to wearing the face muzzles, people happily damaging their immunosystems, people, all kinds of bizarre behavior, people wearing face masks, Fiona, in a public, because I'm not sure what it's like in Ireland, but here you don't have to wear a mask if you're outside, but I'd say half the people are wearing the masks outside as well. I mean, this is something that George Orwell probably never even dreamed of. The compliance of the masses to this tyranny is remarkable.
Yes, it's here too. And, you know, I did a little short video on Twitter. It was my first go at it. But I am using the exemption, the regulation that gives me an exemption, a self-declared exemption for this, which, of course, again, the way it's been designed, the way it's been marketed and pushed on the public is such that they don't want us to understand what our rights truly are. But they're also trying to manipulate the public into shunning and regarding those who don't wear a face mask for whatever genuine reason we wouldn't wear one as outcasts, social outcasts. So, you know, you've got the behavioral insights team, they're working, and the SAGE report has shown that you guys have had behavioral psychologists working with the government to basically make you all fear paralyzed. So this same is being done here, and it's worked a treat. And now when I go out, I am genuinely, because I look at this, the only one not wearing a face mask. And I'm not being paranoid, but people do scurry away from me now that, you know, that happens, you know, sometimes anyway, but like they literally scurry away.
That actually happened to me yesterday, Fiona. I was going into a major shopping centre, and as I went in, they had a big. I tweeted it out. They had a big sign up saying what's the term they use? It was facial coverings. Oh, it was lovely and fluffy. Facial coverings are mandatory. Please make sure please ensure you conform. And I walked past it and it caught my eye. So I stopped and I walked back because I wanted to take a photograph. And as I walked back, there was a more elderly man than me walking in. And because I came within maybe 4 or 5 feet of him, he almost had a coronary heart attack. He was so scared. Oh my God, the invisible virus is going to get me. And that's how governments across the West have managed to scare the general public remarkably, rightly or wrongly. But no doubt the fear factor is right in there, isn't it?
Yes, it really is. And I mean, I have an example of a cousin actually in the UK, and he will not go out and was at a family funeral and refused to get out of the car, sat in the car in his face mask. And when people would go to the window to speak to him, he wouldn't even take down the window, roll down the window, because he was so frightened. So when the media and the government have reduced people to that, what is life about then? Is this the sort of life you want to lead? And he's otherwise healthy, David, but has literally been paralyzed with fear.
Well, this is the first time, Fiona, that we've seen the healthy being essentially isolated and closed down. It never works that way. But I mean, the other thing is we've seen. I'm gonna bring Jed into the stream in a second. But we've seen our NHS system, and the function seems to be that we must protect the NHS, not that the NHS protects us, as in people. So, and actually, before I came on the stream, I actually tweeted out, I saw a thing from someone working in the NHS, a really good thread. If you go onto my Twitter stream, folks, I've highlighted it. Someone who works in the NHS basically saying they're operating at about 20% of capacity. The hospitals have never been quieter. What's this about? I mean, if this is about health, it's a really weird thing where the hospital, and I'm sure it's the same in Ireland as well. The hospitals are certainly here. They're when it comes to this whole issue, there are no basically COVID patients. So how is it a pandemic?
It's in my estimation, from what I can see, and from my conversations with people who know much better than I do, it is not a pandemic right now. That is not to deny the virus. That is not to deny that it is nasty. I know 4 people who've had it, David, but it has cleared the globe. It is mutating and weakening. It is being kept alive, as you've said, by these bogus, and I have to say bogus because we need clarity, cases. What that's going to lead to in the autumn and the winter, as I've said to you, I fear for the children. And I fear for the elderly again, because what they're going to do, they're going to vaccinate them and they'll try and vaccinate the rest of us. And I say unto you that this could very well introduce mayhem into the system. Just to finish, you're quite right. We don't have a health service anymore. I have great affection for the NHS because I lived in the UK. I had my 2 children in the NHS, one in Scotland. I have nothing but good things to report about it. Thank goodness my experiences were positive. But over here as well, we don't have a health service anymore. It's all COVID. If you don't have COVID, they don't want to know. It's tele-GP. It's going to be telemedicine. And I heard somebody reliable tell me that if you present in hospital, in A&E, regardless of what you have, they will isolate you to test you for COVID. So if you're going in with a heart attack, David, and I'm giving you the extreme case, you may be neglected until that COVID test comes, the results of that COVID test come in. Our health services are worldwide are no more. And the sooner we realize the gravity of this, the better. It's never going to be the same.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, Jed now has joined us. Hi, Jed. First of all, you're very welcome. Nice to meet
you both.
our unofficial superstar. Jen, I mean, one of the things, going back to what Fiona said, she's talking about what's happening to the kids in terms of in Ireland with being having to have a flu vaccine, which we don't have to cope with in the UK yet. But one of the things I've noticed is going on the other part of the age spectrum, the other end, the last number of days has been pretty warm here. Not today, but it has been very warm. And I've seen elderly people walking around in the open, which they shouldn't be doing. But anyway, in the open, Jed, they're masked up. You can see their faces are going kind of purple because the pressure it's putting on them. And that can't be good for our elderly people, can it, Jed?
Well, no, it's not, David. And you see, you're going to think I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist here, but I did say right at the beginning of this, way back in March, that I thought this was all. I'm going to be careful what I say because I don't want your stream to be shut down.
Yeah.
But I've got a feeling that this was determined. So the fact that we're now having more restrictions now, as we're finding, for example, today we had 812 positive tests in the UK out of 65 million people. So we've gone from people are dying in great numbers, so we need to do X, Y, and Z, to actually we're now looking at cases, and this is a point that Fiona was bringing up. It's the number of cases they're now looking at, and coronavirus. And you're absolutely right. We've changed from COVID-19. It was COVID-19 March and April. Now it's coronavirus, and the test is for coronavirus, not COVID-19. So you got to ask yourself, why are they doing what they're doing? Is it for, and it is a conspiracy theory, but is it for the one world government that they've been talking about for the past 20 years?
Yeah, well, before we get into
controlling us, aren't they?
Yeah, well, before we get to these things, the issues like that, I think the one thing that's really clear is, like, what was the number of new positive cases you mentioned there? It's 800 or something, wasn't it?
812 today.
Right, Fiona. So 812 positive cases. But the question that we have to ask is 812 positive cases of what?
Correct.
That's the question. And that is something, can I just say, that's one of the reasons why I despise the mainstream media everywhere, not just in the UK, in Ireland, the States. It's an obvious question that any sentient being would ask. 812 cases of what, Jed, Fiona? But the truth is, we can't be sure, to put it in the most mild basis, because it's implied it's COVID-19, but it can't be. It could be broad coronavirus, but then that raises issues like, well, is it infection or is it just antibodies that are from previous times? And so this is the most weird disease ever. So deadly that you don't even know you have it. So
that's the point, David, isn't it? Because out of 812 positive cases, we've had 128 admitted to hospital. Out of 65 million people. 128
admitted to hospital with what?
That's the point. With what? And I agree, it's with what? Are we testing for coronavirus? And if so, which it sounds like we are, then me having a cold would mean I am one of the 812 if I had the common cold and I was tested. So, but that falls in line with what Fiona said about the flu vaccine. If you get the flu vaccine, and they're now going to give it to children, and they're already giving it to the elderly. And
well, actually, Jed, in the UK, everybody over 50 this flu season is entitled to their flu vaccine. Yeah, you just have to be 50 now, Jed.
I'm certainly not going to get it, David. I'm over 50, no. You know that, and I'm certainly not going to have it. Because then what they'll do is they'll test me for coronavirus and say I've got it, and therefore lock me down, lock my family down, etc., and kill my livelihood. So there is an ultimate goal here, and I don't understand what the ultimate goal is, other than conspiracy theory.
Well, one of the things that's happening, and Fiona, this is true very much in Ireland, is that I think the Irish economy has certainly proven to be a victim of COVID-19. I saw a figure, it might have been on I think one of Dave Cullen's streams, but it was saying basically Irish unemployment, I think, Fiona, went from pre-COVID, I think it was 5% or something. And I think the May number was in the high 20s. Is that about right?
That is about right, and that's an underestimate. And the central bank were using the assumptions that the Central Bank of Ireland were making when they were coming out with their projections was that everything would start gearing back to normal from the summer.
Yeah.
And their worst case scenario was 25% unemployment. And obviously, from where they were looking when they made that prediction, you got to say, all right, that's reasonable. Except I would be with you, Jed. I never thought that we would get back to normal in the autumn time. In fact, I believe we're heading into the worst of it from here on in. So and I've seen the GDP collapse in the UK as well. It's unbelievable. Well, to be honest, no, wait a minute. It's not unbelievable given what's happening. Yes, we are witnessing, guys. You can come to your own conclusions as to why the controlled demolition of the global economy.
Well, it's certainly the controlled demolition of most global economies. But I actually saw, Jed, quite an interesting chart which showed pretty much most countries around the world, and they've all had, to varying degrees, collapsing economies. But there was one economy that's actually showing a bit of growth. Can you guess what that one economy might be?
Would it be China?
Oh, you went for that prize. Yes, China, good old China, the source of the China virus. Its economy actually has, in the last 3 months, shown growth. Everywhere else is showing different degrees of apocalypse, basically. That's a bit of a coincidence, isn't it, Jed?
Well, it is. And again, we get back to what is the ultimate goal? If we now go into winter, and we vaccinate people for flu, and therefore the case number rises, then we'll go back into a lockdown and the economy will collapse even further. Yeah. So therefore, we'll then be back to February, March time, April time next year. We'll start coming back out slowly as the weather warms, and then we'll get back into it as the weather cools and they start vaccinating people again.
Well, I mean, one of the things, sorry, Jed, one of the things, Fiona, is, and Jed, you just touched on it. I mean, we're just about finishing. The summer is almost gone. And when I look outside today, it's sure as heck is definitely gone. But it's pretty horrible, I'm sure, down with you, Fiona, as well. But we're going to enter the season when the respiratory diseases return. As we've talked about the cold, we've talked about the flu, and they will undoubtedly return in September and October. And if that's the case, is that not leading us, as Jed's pointed out, into what's going to be a very, very the worst is not behind us. The worst seems to be going to be in front of us. Well, what do you think, Fiona?
I agree. Yes, the worst is in front of us for many reasons, not least the vaccination program. But you've got to remember that the policies that our governments forced upon us are immune compromising of themselves. Yep. The whole isolation policy is detrimental to our immune system. The nonsense of 6 feet apart. But what is even worse, for me at least, is the muzzling, the masking. There is no conclusive, robust scientific evidence that wearing a face mask is in any way effective against viral transmission. And there is evidence that wearing a face mask is damaging to the healthy. Professor Dolores Cahill was saying if you put children in face masks every day, it increases the concentration of CO2 and induces hypoxia and hypercapnia.
Yeah.
We are talking, and I am being serious here, we are destroying the health of our children. If the government and the health service and the school systems require them to wear masks at school. This is tantamount, in my view, and I say this, and I hope I don't get you off, David, to child abuse. To force a child to wear a mask, not least the wider population.
Well, the thing is actually a very interesting point, Fiona. I'm not sure what in the Irish legislation is, but in the UK, no child under 13 has there's no requirement whatsoever to wear a mask at this point. So the saddest thing I've seen yesterday, I was in a garage, Jed, and I saw a family, and there was two young kids. The young kids would have been, I don't know, 4 or 5. They were very young, tots. And they both had masks on. And they were dancing, they were cheering, they were all happy, they got their masks on. And as Fiona said, I mean, number one, there's no need for that to happen. But the parents have embraced it, and they've got their kids masked up. I mean, what's your thoughts on that, Jed?
Well, I think for anybody to be masked up is wrong, because apart from the points that Fiona brought out, there's actually now, I think, at least one study out that says breathing into a mask, where they're talking about the droplets, breathing into the mask vaporizes those droplets and makes them smaller. And as I've said to you in the past, the mask that we are buying on the high street and the face coverings and whatever you want to call it, a scarf, they're not filtering anything out. They're not filtering anything you breathe in or anything you breathe out. But what you're actually doing is, as that moisture from you breathing out hits the front of the back of that mask that you've got on, it vaporizes and makes particles even smaller. So it gets through the woven fabric of whatever mask type you're wearing.
Yeah,
because you are not protecting yourself or anybody. And just one more point, David, because I know you've mentioned it. I still have not worn a mask in a shop. And I will not.
Well, let's do a quick hands up. So hands up, everybody on the stream. I'm watching you. If, like Fiona, like myself, and like Jed, have you worn a mask or not? So far, we haven't, and I don't intend to, and I won't put myself in places where I have to. But let's just see. Yeah, and so I'll watch your comments as they come in. Have you worn a mask or not? I tell a lie. I keep saying this. I did once. The Apple store made me wear a mask. That's the only time it ever happened to me. I had to go in. Never been back. Won't be going back. But yeah, I mean, no. Alison, here's Alison here is on the stream. Alison runs a really good Facebook site on which I sometimes appear, and Lockdown Skeptics. Because there's a lot of skepticism around about this, and so, of course, if you're on an airplane, you've got to put the mask on, which is totally understandable. Somebody said there's an interesting one. Yes, sadly enforced in Tesco. How is it enforced in Tesco? The law doesn't require it. There's no law. It's a regulation. So whoever says it's enforced in Tesco are in breach of the regulation if you have a valid reason not to have it. So I would watch out for that one, folks. But I mean, we live in a strange masked world now, where it's almost like a dystopian hell we've fallen into, Fiona. Where I walk out, I'm sure we all feel this. You walk around, and if you're not wearing a mask, you start to feel you're the abnormal one. I mean, we are the new abnormal because we don't mask up. What a world!
Yeah, I mean, it is dystopian, isn't it, Jed? I'm sure you agree. And it just feels to me that it's getting worse. The psychological warfare that's been waged on the public is bearing fruit. They have been manipulated really, really well.
No, absolutely. And that's why you get the ones that wear masks that go after the ones that don't. And what are the phrases that they use? You're killing people. You're killing the old. You're not killing nobody. But that is what's been pumped out initially by the government to get everybody into lockdown back in March, but predominantly by the media ever since. Since this broke, the media has bombarded us with, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, you are murdering people. You are you're killing your neighbours, you're killing your family and your friends, which is a lie.
Well, actually, before I came on air, I happened to be sitting watching TV, and up came a government ad, a lovely 60-second government ad with happy music in the background, telling us, do it for someone else. Do it, save Granny. I mean, the inference being that you're going to kill Granny if you don't mask up. And this is, and Fiona, you referenced this earlier. This is the psychology, of course, that is being deployed quite brazenly, really. It's a psychological sort of psychops to make us feel, or certainly make most people feel guilty if they don't wear a mask. Whereas I would feel guilty if I wore a mask. So they've got a lot more work to do in me. But it is this psychological warfare that you mentioned, Fiona, isn't it?
Yes, it is very much so. And in fact, the way it has been promoted and marketed by the politicians and other influencers is such that they almost won't need the police to enforce it. They'll induce the population to police it themselves. Yep. And that's the point that we're heading to.
Yep, 100%. Would you agree with that, Jed?
Oh, absolutely. But that also makes it worse because what you get is if the police enforce it, I'll just use these words, David. I know you're saying the regulations, but they'll say, well, this is the law, letter of the law. If the public enforce it, it's an interpretation of what they think the law says, which may very well be even more restrictive than what the law or the regulation says it is. If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So, and I've been involved, as you, with my past, David, and I fully understand psychological warfare, and that's exactly what we're having now.
Yeah,
it is a conditioning. They've got the vast majority of people on side because they've been bombarded with BBC, Sky News, and RTE over. Is it RTE in Ireland?
Yeah.
Constantly bombarded with that information that if you don't do X, Y, and Z, you are killing people. Those of us like us three here, now I'm sure other people that are listening, who are going, well, hang on, show me the evidence. Well, there isn't any. There's just propaganda. What are you testing for? Well, we're testing for coronavirus. Well, yeah, but there are many of them. I have a cold. That's a coronavirus. But you have to follow this, otherwise we'll lock you down. Now we're fining you. The fines have now gone up for compliance. Yet, I'm looking at the figures here today. We've had 16 people in the United Kingdom die. 16.
Die of what? Horrendous in this one because they get away with this, the whole, and Jed, this has been, and Fiona, this has been around the world, the way in which deaths have been attributed to coronavirus, but in actual fact, in some instances, GPs have never, even seen the deceased. They've just made an over the phone a diagnosis of the cause of death because they coughed and then they died. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not exactly scientific, is it? So it's like it's at every angle, Fiona. We're being besieged by propaganda, and boy, is it working. Like, we got to be honest here. I think we shouldn't fool ourselves. The propaganda is working. It's got the people in the masks. I think the people will stay in the masks. I don't know about you. Does anyone see people coming out of masks this side of Christmas?
No,
I don't see anybody coming out of masks for years.
No,
to be honest.
Yeah. Well, my theory is, you see, once they've been in masks long enough, they'll be gagging for the famous vaccine, the V word, the vaccine, which is being, I think the UK government, Jed's ordered 130 million vaccines, population 67 million.
But there you go. And that's right to the point that Fiona brought up earlier. If your own body can't defend you against it, and you need a vaccine, but you don't need one vaccine, you need a vaccine, what?
Good point. Yeah.
Every year or every 6 months. There's even been talk of every 3 months I've seen that you would need a vaccine. That is why they bought them in the quantities that they bought them. But the point is, what's in this vaccine? What is it trying to protect you against? When we actually know that the flu vaccine, although it's regenerated each year because of the strains in Australia, then we get the vaccine for that strain because it will come here. But the virus is constantly changing. So they're going to vaccinate us and vaccinate us and vaccinate us. What's in this vaccine? Who's making it? Who's profiting from it?
Well, there is that.
There's a money factor here, David, and as it's always been said, follow the money.
Well, that's all. Well, can I ask Fiona, Jed? We fully understand what the story is in the UK. So, what's the position, Fiona, in Ireland as regards the vaccine? Have you got a population of what, 5 million or whatever it is? How many tens of millions has the Irish government got?
Well, yeah. I know. No, I'm not so sure whether they put in orders, but I know they're funding Gavi, because remember the sort of, there was an alliance to warp speed this vaccine on. We have the Constitution, you see, and that's causing them a little bit of difficulty mandating this thing. But I almost say to people that making it mandatory or not, it's almost neither here nor there. It's really not the issue, because what they'll do is they'll mandate it in effect by saying, you can't have it, then you can't renew your driving license, you can't renew your season ticket, you can't go to university, you can't, and any of the official documentation that we need to renew will be predicated upon having a full vaccination record. So this will be their way of introducing sort of a vaccination tattoo, if you like. I mean, I don't want to go into there's lots of information circulating about this new vaccine. I can't really state definitively what they plan to put in it. We don't know. But I agree with you, Jed. How can it be effective? In fact, Fauci has come out and said, I think he said it's only going to be 50% effective. Don't quote me, 50-60%. Fauci himself has said the first round of the vaccine. So
the first 2 points there is, first of all, yes, I think it was about just over 50% that Fauci said. The second one is he was indicted yesterday in a sealed indictment. The news hasn't reported that, have they? He's been indicted by President Trump on a sealed indictment.
Well, that remains to be seen, Jed. We need to see. But I mean, regardless of whether Fauci's indicted or otherwise, and I don't want to get into that. The main thing for me is that I just see that there's this unstoppable COVID train that's going through our economy, our society, dehumanizing us to so many degrees. I mean, the worst thing for me of all is, well, at least I was going to say we can all see ourselves. With you, Jed, we see Winston Churchill's face, but I can see Fiona's face. She can see mine. And that's human beings. We watch it. We look at each other. Our expressions, if we're smiling, if we're laughing, that's the essence of our humanity. When you mask it, that's the thing that actually bothers me most, Fiona. It's taken away the very essence of us as human beings, and that enrages me, because Jed's made the point that we could be in masks for years, and I wouldn't want to disagree with you on that one, Jed. But
I agree with him.
But what is that going to do? And actually, just my ancillary point to that, actually, for you, Fiona, because you mentioned kids earlier, kids. Young kids in particular, they're learning from each other by seeing each other and play and all the stuff we all know. We were all kids once. But if you mask these kids up, what will happen to them, Fiona, in the years ahead?
I feel, I'm a mum to two, I feel we're destroying this young generation that we have now. I feel it will be irreparable. We will ruin them. We will subject them to, they will become autonomous, robotic, obeying, unquestioning, and they will not know love. They will not know affection. They will not know camaraderie. Those wonderful memories that they should be enjoying in their childhood will be denied them. This is criminal, what we're doing to our children. It really is. And I have my pinned tweet, if anybody wants to go in and see this. It's heartbreaking. Is a school with social distancing and masks, and then certain children are put in pods, guys, pods.
Yeah,
and they're little bricks. What are we doing? For
Mind
goodness
control. Mind control, Fiona. This is it. He's controlling the populace. And when those kids are in the 20s and 30s, anything the government and the media push out, they will believe almost like a religion. It has to be true, because they will have been conditioned long enough to believe whatever the government says, whatever the media says, must be true, and we must bow down to it.
I mean, actually, I put this comment up here. Bob says they've been desensitizing kids for years. And that actually, I need to finish shortly, but I just wanted to run this one past both of you as well. I think it's fair to say that we're probably, all three of us, and indeed many on the stream, maybe past our teenage years, right? But when we were teenagers, I always thought one of the great things of being young at that teenager, back to that Marlon Brando quote from, I can't remember the movie, what are you rebelling against? And the answer is, well, what do you got? The whole point about being a teenager, I think, it's rebellion. It's healthy. It's good. But what shocks me is, I think, and I could be wrong, I think a lot of teenagers are completely on board with this. I think some of them think that masks are chic and fashionable. I think that. And so, Fiona, I'll go to you first. What's happened to the teenage generation that instead of them basically giving the same gesture that Jed has on his profile here to the masks, they embrace them. They're trying to work out who can get the most fashionable muzzle on them. What's gone wrong? Fiona first, then I'll come to you, Jed.
It's the TikTok generation. It's the social media generation. It's the children they have been conditioned, Jed, and mind controlled to a great extent. And they are looking at different designs on the masks. And I'll tell you for why. My own two, very, very quickly. My eldest agrees with it. She doesn't like me challenging. When I had a conversation with a woman and I took her to the dentist and we were there and we were talking about, how can you wear a mask? She walked away. She likes the idea and I'll tell you why, because they follow K-pop. They love the Korean pop, those guys, they're good band, but they're androgynous. They wear masks. The Asians have been wearing masks. So my two say, oh, that's okay. They wear them. So it's TikTok, it's social media, it's conditioning. And I try.
Yes, I'm complying because I've got my mask on. Look at my selfie. That's what it is. It's all that I want to be part of the group. And the in-group at the moment is the mask wearers. The out-group, we're part of the out-group because we're the ones questioning. We're the ones that say, well, hang on, give me evidence. But the kids, they've been in the in-group since the day they were born. We are adults now that were born when there was no internet. We have now adults of children who were born with the internet. The adults were born with the internet. So they're socially conditioned to be part of the in-group. So this word is natural to them. I've been told that's what it is. That's the in thing. And I can get a pretty pattern on it. And I look cool and look at my selfie. Yeah, and I'm saving people. I'm not killing people. Yeah, you are because you're not wearing your mask. You're killing people.
Yeah,
I know that because the government's told me that.
Yeah, I know. There's nothing that says rock and roll like whacking on a mask and flopping. It's so rock and roll, isn't it? I don't know. Did either of you see? There was I think it was up in Newcastle in the northeast of England. One of the first outdoor concerts. And I think it was Van Morrison actually from here. Van Morrison was playing an outdoor gig, but it was a socially. Did you see the image? It was a socially distant outdoor gig where they'd got little metal, I don't know, pods or whatever, and a couple of people. You sat in your little metal. It looked like a hospital bed, a big hospital bed, and you sat in a chair and you watched them. And I thought to myself, I'll never, if that's the way it is, I'll never be to a concert again because sure as hell I'm not doing that. I think, Jed, you make a good point. The internet has certainly had an impact. And as Fiona said, the influence, the TikTok, that's a good way of putting it, actually. Funny enough, that actually almost completes the circle perfectly because we all know that the virus came from China. And we know that TikTok comes from China. So maybe we need to have a conversation about China one of these days, but I think that one might have to wait. Listen, folks, we've come to the end of our time. Can I just say, first of all, an extra special thanks to Fiona for being on the stream. Fiona, thank you very much. Please follow Fiona. You can see she's got her @ on Twitter. She consistently tweets out sensible stuff, which, believe you me, on Twitter is not the norm.
I try.
Yeah, and gets abused for it. So, Fiona, a really big thank you. And I know that a lot of us folks in the UK look across into Ireland. We're with you, people like you and all the other people fighting against this tyranny. Sometimes, like me, I can't believe what the Irish government's doing. It's kind of horrific. But then I think, Jed, our government will ultimately catch up and play the same horrible stuff on us. I don't think it's going to be that much, delayed. But
of course it will, David. David, can I just say something just before I go, if you don't mind? It's completely off subject, but I know my good lady is downstairs listening to this, so I'd just like to say happy anniversary for tomorrow, sweetheart.
Oh, well, I'm sure we'd all join you in that very romantic gesture, Jed. So well done, you, and congratulations to your wife.
Thank you.
So look, that's fine. And thank you, everybody, for being part of the stream. I mean, what we really want to try to do is have good conversations, bring informed debate to you. And I'm sure you'll agree that Fiona and Jed have been very helpful in contributing towards people just being informed. Whether, these platforms like it or not, there's nothing wrong with facts and sensible people sitting around having the sort of conversations that the mainstream media, those parasites, will never ever do. So that's my mission. Thank you for being here. To all those, can I also say a big thanks to all those who watched this in replay, because I know you were numerous. So I know you can't always be here in the hour, but thanks again for your patronage as well. And hope to catch up with you folks on Friday evening. So in the meantime, bye Fiona, bye Jed, bye.
Bye.
Take care, Jed. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Fiona. Bye.
Bye.